I got a lot of real spooky stories to read today. I swear, man, I never know how to start these videos. Anyways, last time we were in the nether, we left with just enough netherite to get everything netherite except for our shovel. So that's the goal for today's video. We are trying to find some more netherite. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the first story of the day. It's from r/nosleep from user manin_lyset. A package marked return to sender. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Can't stand those guys. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water, all the while screaming epic win, epic fail, damn it, epic maintenance of the status quo, for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So, when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I could only assume was a birthday card. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written, "Return to sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I'd leave this package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of crap that refused to open without a good tug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door, but you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. No point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then, I forgot all about it, until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly, sweet odor similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went to look for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire freaking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box. A pair of scissors in my hand. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger into the spoiled meat juices. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like an open burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, crap, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke, begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out the door for a breath of fresh air, but in the short time I'd spent in the garage, The smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared. A clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But, as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of the box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor. Dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with a corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box, but the smell may have left a mark throughout my house. But there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt so bad for me they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Pretty warm here. Still got plenty of food. That kind of stuff. And then, on his last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door. No way. That was insane. I just had chills go down my entire body. So this guy, the neighbor had shipped himself, and then this guy, he was returned to sender, and this guy was moving the box. He dropped it and heard the crack noise. And he's like, oh man, I hope it didn't break whatever was inside. Turns out it was his neighbor's neck. He's like, oh man, I'm not going to tell my neighbor about this. That's nuts. I've never read anything like this. I know we've all seen those videos where like an influencer will ship themselves across the country, or I mean, most of them are staged, but you know, this guy, he wasn't staging anything. So respect for that. The next story is also from r/nosleep from user odd_directions. Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the start of the pandemic. 3 months ago, we lost contact with him. Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the beginning of 2020. He said the world was about to end, and we didn't believe him. He told us to wake up. It was raining that day. I remember focusing on the water hitting the window panes while my sister tried to change Dad's mind. I knew it was no use. He was too stubborn to listen to anyone except maybe Donald Trump, who had just declared that COVID-19 had pushed the world into a pandemic. Dad wanted us to join him, and when we told him no, he called us brainwashed. He purchased the land before I was born, only because of the dilapidated military facility that came with it. It was abandoned sometime in the 60s, I think. My sister was there from the beginning, even before Dad's obsession pushed Mom away. It's hard for me to imagine what he was like back then. Mom says he was a gentleman, but they married young, and a person can change a lot during those years. And so did Dad. All I remember from him during childhood are the weekends at the bunker, constantly renovating it and stockpiling it with everything he would need to survive down there. We couldn't stop him. He was the best dad, not even a good one. But it was so sad to see him go all the same. He was excited, even though he thought that civilization was about to collapse. I guess that happens when you've spent your entire adult life preparing. We had to set up an old radio to keep in touch with him. He didn't trust mobile phones. We didn't hear from him often, just once a month, sometimes less. The last time he radioed in, he said he had found a hidden door. He was going to see where it went. That was 3 months ago. You think he's okay? My sister said. He wasn't in great health. I told him. We sat in the car, on our way to check up on him, driving through the heat wave. His radio might have broken down, I said. Let's not assume the worst. But I felt worried too. There was something strange about that hidden door and his tone when he mentioned it. It just didn't sit right with me. But maybe it was just the heat and the endless desert around us that played tricks on my mind. I couldn't really tell. It was dark when we arrived. Dad's truck stood where he had left it, beneath some tarp that blew in the chilly, sand-carrying wind. We turned on our flashlights and walked to the cliff above the bunker. The steel door was made to withstand a nuclear blast. Luckily, I owned the only spare key in existence. Before I used it, I banged on the door as hard as I could and yelled for Dad. I worried he would mistake us for intruders and shoot us. If he was confused, and if it was dark, it was a real possibility. I banged again and yelled at the top of my lungs. Dad, are you in there? It's me, Josh. Evelyn is here as well. I don't think he can hear you, Evelyn said. I nodded. Dad, I'm going to open the door now. I was 17 the last time I was here. Back then, it was the Muslims that were going to end civilization as we knew it. Before that, it was the Russians. Now it was China. There was always something threatening his beloved freedom, and yet he was never truly free. My sister put her hand on my wrist just as I was about to unlock the door. You know, she said, maybe we should just call the authorities after all and... No, I said, he'll fight them. I unlocked the heavy door. A rancid smell escaped the darkness inside. It was the odor of death. I recognized it from when Dad tried, and ultimately failed, to learn how to hunt and let a reindeer carcass rot on the property for weeks. My sister had already stopped visiting him by then. I didn't tell her what the smell reminded me of. She covered her nose with her shirt. We descended the spiral stairs. It creaked for each step we took, almost as if it was about to fall apart. I tried the light switch at the bottom. The click echoed throughout the long corridor leading to the living area. Nothing happened. I realized that the batteries, which he charged by the use of an old exercise bike, were dead. That meant he was most likely dead as well. The generator could be broken, I said, but maybe you should wait back here, just in case, you know. I pointed my flashlight in front of me. The light was too weak to reach the end of the corridor. On the way here, I had felt ready. I felt sad, the kind of empty sadness you feel after the death of a parent that was never any good, but I didn't feel worried. Now, on the other hand, while staring into the dark corridor that I used to run through as a kid, I was afraid. The fear reminded me of how my childhood night terrors used to start. They always crept up on me in the darkness, grew with the grotesque shadows on my bedroom ceiling. I'm not letting you go in there alone, Evelyn said. We stay together. We walked into the darkness. The foul smell intensified for every step we took, and so did my heartbeat. I was glad my sister didn't stay behind. The bunker seemed so much smaller than I remembered, much more cramped. The asymmetry between my memories and reality made everything feel off somehow. Just as if the bunker was merely a model of the real thing, but it wasn't. I had just grown up. The Confederate flag greeted us at the end of the corridor. It hung on a concrete wall. It looked pale in the hot spot of the flashlight, almost like a phantom. And of course, in many ways it was. A ghost from a long time ago, or perhaps a corpse brought back to life. An abomination. It reminded me of Dad more than anything else. You have to be seriously confused to praise freedom as much as Dad and hang that symbol of lesser freedom in the world on your wall, Evelyn said. He wanted to protect his freedom so much that he built a prison for himself. I removed the light from the flag, leaving only darkness. You bet he was confused. We entered the main chamber. It was overfilled with litter and clutter. Empty cans, both the food and kinds of beer, lay scattered across the sticky floor. We had to take large steps not to step on any trash. That's weird. Evelyn pointed her flashlight at the small dining table. Look. My hair stood up on my neck before I even realized what she meant. The table was set for 3 people. I didn't say anything for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing, and just when I was about to speak, my sister interrupted me. Who the hell was here with him? We don't know, I began. I mean, he might have left the old plates on the table and... A sound of something falling to the ground came from one of the other rooms further into the bunker. I pointed my light in its direction, but couldn't see what made it. Okay, so why point your light when you could just, at that point, value your life? Be like, you know what? He's probably fine. That was probably him. Let's just head out of here now. Dad, I yelled. It's me, Josh. You there? No response. I'm afraid, Evelyn whispered. Something isn't right. I only vaguely heard what she said. My focus was on something else. Something on the wall on the other end of the room. That's not supposed to be there. I slowly walked toward it. That must have been what he talked about over the radio. Dad had hacked away a layer of concrete, for whatever reason, and uncovered a rusty metal door behind it. It stood ajar. A lukewarm, musty breeze came out of it. My sister walked up to me as I carefully pried the door open with the back of my flashlight. I felt my heart in my throat. I could hear my sister begging for us to leave, almost in tears, but I needed to know what was behind that door. It was imperative to understand what had happened here. I needed to know. I needed closure. What in heaven's name? Evelyn looked over my shoulder. Why is this here? Behind the door was a room about the size of a broom cupboard. It was unremarkable, except for a circular hole in the middle of the floor. I shone my light into it, but I couldn't see the bottom. Just as I thought, it was big enough for a person, my sister said. Do you think he fell? Drops of sweat from my forehead fell down the pit. I felt dizzy and stepped back, afraid I would fall inside. My sister picked up a can filled with some rotten beans and threw it down the hole. It clattered against the walls as it bounced from one side to another. The sound faded away until we couldn't hear it anymore. There was no indication it touched down at the bottom. I stretched out my hand and held it above the opening. It's warm, I said. The air, I mean. Maybe he fell. Evelyn stepped back, almost as if she were convinced. Can we please get out of here? She reached for my arm. We can return with the police. Please, Josh? It wasn't dark when Dad found this, I said. He would have been able to see the hole. Josh, please. Just give me a moment to think. I walked toward the hallway that led to the other rooms, desperately hoping to find him. For some reason, it was important for me to see him, to be able to leave without wondering. I needed to know if he was truly dead. I just want to... I stopped myself after I accidentally pointed the flashlight on the floor in the middle of the hallway, revealing a pair of feet. I think I found him. I ran up to the body. Wait, Evelyn yelled and reluctantly followed me to avoid being left alone. It wasn't Dad. I screamed upon the realization. My mind couldn't comprehend what I had just seen. I spun around and tried to run away, completely acting on instinct and crashing into my sister. She grabbed me, kept me still, as she looked behind me. Down at the dead body on the floor, she began to cry while her hands trembled uncontrollably against my shoulders. Oh my God, she said. How is it possible? It's you. Let's get the hell out of here, I said. Move. There was nothing that could explain this, and the more my mind tried to, moving in an endless loop doing so, the dread grew inside me. I only got a glimpse at the body before I panicked, but my sister was right. The half-rotten face was the same as mine, with a bullet hole in the middle of the forehead. We stumbled our way through the living area, tipping over chairs and kicking cans all over the place. And just as we were about to get out of the mess, a familiar voice echoed through the hallway we had just escaped. Josh! It was Dad. We both stopped in our tracks. Is that you, Josh? Dad? I yelled back. What the hell is going on here? Don't worry. It sounded like he was at the other end of the bunker, possibly inside the storeroom. I killed him, put a bullet right between his eyes. Come out from there, I yelled. We have to leave. It's not safe here. Silence. Something is wrong, Evelyn said. I don't think... Dad, I yelled, come out. I can't move, Dad said. I'm stuck under a shelf. I need your help. I turned to my sister. Go back up. I'll get that old bastard out of there. We'll be right behind you, okay? Think, Josh, Evelyn begged. You think he's been stuck under a shelf for... I should have listened, but even after what we had just seen, I couldn't bring myself to even consider something as outlandish as what my sister was suggesting. It was simply too far-fetched, too unbelievable to penetrate all the layers of presumptions about reality. It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. Hence, I ran back to the hallway, yelling for my sister to get back up to the surface and wait for us there. I'm coming, Dad. I only slowed down to carefully step over the corpse that bore my face. Perhaps, I thought, it was just a coincidence. A burglar that just happened to look like me. After all, the face had begun to rot. It obviously wasn't me. I felt stupid, and I almost convinced myself that it was just my childhood fear of the dark coming back to life down here. And then, just as I was about to walk past the small composting toilet that stood inside a small room at the end of the hallway, I stopped. Shivers spread across my entire body, paralyzing me. Dad sat on the toilet. His gun still hung from his trigger finger, and his brain was splattered across the wall behind him. He had his journal in his lap, covered in blood. "Josh," Dad yelled from the darkness, "help me." I was frozen in place, both by fear and confusion, unable to make any decisions. "Come on, Josh," Dad kept yelling. "I need your help." My mind was racing. There was no way of knowing who was who. When I heard Dad's voice yelling for help while watching his dead body, nothing but absolute terror reverberated inside me. I slowly reached for the journal in Dad's lap and grabbed it, hoping it would shed some light on the situation. I was just about to open it when my sister screamed. I ran back, this time jumping over my doppelganger's body, and found her looking at something at the corner of the main chamber. "I told you," I said, but changed my mind. "Are you okay? What happened?" "It's me," she cried. Crawled up in the corner was her naked, dead body. Her head had been twisted in such a way that the neck had been broken. "There's something seriously wicked going on here," I said. "Dad shot himself in the head, a long time ago by the looks of it, and yet he keeps yelling for help. Let's go back to the car now." We drove away from the bunker as fast as we could, leaving whatever was still alive down there yelling for help. My sister insisted on staying at my place for a few days. I didn't mind having her around. We shared an experience no one else could relate to, and we needed each other to overcome the trauma. It took a day for me to build up the courage to open Dad's journal. It began with his usual deranged conspiracy theories. I flipped past them. He only made short notes. Found a hidden door. Deep pit. Possible the remains of some old black project. Evelyn and Josh woke me up. A surprise visit. Didn't hear them enter. Strange. Had dinner with them. Something seems off. It isn't them. They tried to make me illegible. God help me, it isn't them. I shot him right between the eyes. Hiding in the bathroom now. This will probably be my last entry. God forgive me. Chills went down my spine as I read the last entry on the blood-drenched page. I never got the other one. She's still out there somewhere. I only got one bullet left. I won't allow her to do that aberrant thing to me. Forgive me. My sister has been cooking for hours. She just called me from the kitchen. "Josh, come here. I want to show you something." Okay, so the first doppelganger was shot by a gun, but the sister's body had its neck twisted. So I'm thinking that who he's at home with is not his real sister. Like, that has to be a doppelganger, and his real sister, just got killed. This next one's from r/scary stories from user trash_Tia. Today, my son broke character at the breakfast table. He wasn't acting like himself. He wasn't fighting with his siblings, who were unusually quiet. Callie sat silently, pushing her breakfast around her plate. There were no brutal fights to the death over the bathroom. No constant bickering about cereal. Zach wasn't kicking his siblings under the table to start arguments. And I didn't have to shout once. It was far too quiet. "Jonas," I spoke up, looking up from my iPad. It was too quiet. Which meant my children were either sick or something was brewing. Jonas, my eldest at 16, was usually the instigator. But he couldn't even look me in the eye. "What's going on?" I set down my iPad, and across the table, Zach flinched, gaze glued to his bowl of untouched cereal. Callie ducked her head, thick brown strands hanging in her face. I knew this stance. I knew my children. Too quiet and guilty. Just like 5 years ago when they shattered my mom's vase playing The Floor is Lava. They'd broken something. I sighed, noticing the atmosphere. Jonas and Zach were clearly trying to stay silent. And Callie was one squeak away from singing like a canary. All right, as long as it's not your grandfather's urn, I don't care what you've broken, as long as you fix it. Dad's hurting us. At first, I didn't even hear my son. I was too busy reaching across the table and grabbing maple syrup for my pancakes. But then he said it again, stabbing his fork through his breakfast. His voice choked up. Dad's hurting us. Zach's head snapped up, narrowed eyes glued to his brother, frightened. What are you doing? He hissed. Zach straightened up with a tense smile. It's okay, Mom. Jonas is just... He's hurting us, Jonas whispered, curling into himself. His eyes found mine. Hollow, broken. How did I not notice? How did I not see the shadows under his eyes? The agony creased between his brows. I'm not staying silent anymore, he whispered. You two can, but I'm not. Jonas glared down at the table. I can't do this anymore. He broke into sobs that immediately broke my heart. I stood and aimed to wrap my arms around my son, but the second I touched him, he flinched away, eyes wide, almost feral. He shoved me back, diving to his feet. No, get away from me. I ignored him. I wrapped my arms around him, and after fighting me, screaming and sobbing at me to get away, he melted into my shoulder, sniffling. I stayed very calm, but my chest was aching. I pulled away from the hug, trying to smile. Show me, I said, steadying my voice. I couldn't scream. If I showed my children I was scared, I would scare them. Mom, Callie spoke up. Callie, stay here, I said. You too, Zach. I turned to my son. Tell me everything, okay? Everything. I grasped his shoulders. I'm not mad, and I promise I believe you. Jonas nodded and ran upstairs. I followed him on shaky legs, my heart in my throat. Jonas led me inside his room he shared with Zach. When you go to bed, Dad comes into our room and makes sure we're restrained. Jonas lifted up his pillows, and there, looped around his bed frame, were chains. Jonas turned to face me. Ever since we tried to run, he's chained us to our beds. You tried to run away? I choked out. Why? Thick bile crawled up my throat when my son stepped in front of me. His expression crumpled. Mom, he whispered, there's something I need to tell you. Jonas grasped my shoulders, his nails digging in. Harsh. But you can't freak out, all right? You can't call Dad. Just listen to me. I nodded, breathless, as he took my hand and led me back downstairs. 5 years ago, a man approached me on the street in LA. I was 15 and trying to be an actor, he said, leading me out into the backyard. He said I would be paid in full every week, $500 for one simple job. Jonas let go of my hand, and all I had to do was pretend to be your son, Jonas. Jonas's hand slipped from mine. But then he stopped paying us, he whispered. We tried to leave, tried to call the cops, but he was forceful. He punched Zach in the face and drugged our drinks at night. He started chaining us up when you weren't here, and now we're prisoners. He sputtered. I'm not even from here. I'm from Texas. I ran away to LA because I thought I wanted to be an actor. But I'm done playing a dead kid. Jonas ducked his head. We just want to go home, Miss McCarthy. Jonas shook his head. Mom. He corrected himself. So we're going to go. Zach's voice startled me. He was standing beside me, grasping hold of Callie's hand. I'm sorry for your loss, he whispered. But we're not your children. He nodded at Jonas. Get your stuff, Jack. We're going. Jonas nodded. He gave me a quick hug. Thank you for saving us, and I'm sorry for your loss, Miss McCarthy. I stood numb as the three of them started toward the fence. I was reaching into my jeans and pulling out my gun. Something inside me exploded, and I let out a shriek of laughter. I started forwards, pressing the gun into my sweet daughter's head. Stupid kids, I spoke through gritted teeth. I wasn't losing them again. I buried my children once. Never again. Your father ran the auditions, I said, clicking off the safety. I lowered the barrel to Callie's calf. Run and I'll cut off your legs. They froze, and I took pleasure in my next words. But who do you think chose you? I've read stories by this person before, and they're always really good. Like this one, you think the whole time that the mother is like this innocent person, because that's what you're led to believe. But it turns out she's like this diabolical, terrible human being. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about that one. The next story for today is also from r/scary stories by a user named Apache_Blackwater. I wish I'd never watched my family's old home videos. My sister found the tapes in the attic after the funeral, hidden away in a cardboard box filled with a dozen or so tapes. Our father's version of a time capsule, I suppose. She gave me 3 of them before I left to return home, stored in a Ziploc bag, as if she thought they'd rot or leak if left unsealed. I think Dad meant for you to have these, she said, her voice distant. He kept them separate from the others. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Just old home movies, nostalgia maybe, or his version of a time capsule. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, on a rainy Wednesday night, that I started digging through them. I'd had too much to drink, and I felt sentimental. The tapes were high 8 cassettes from the late 90s. On them were handwritten labels written in an elegant hand. Springfield Trip, 93 First Steps, 1994 Xmas 95, and under each label, Nate, my name, had been scratched on the back with a black marker. There was something comforting about the handwriting. Familiar, but not quite. A strange nostalgia, like remembering a dream from someone else's childhood. I found an old camcorder Dad had bought me back in the day, plugged it into the TV with a mess of Frankenstein cords, stuck the oldest tape in, and hit play. The screen flickered, static. Then, a baby me, I guessed, being held by a woman I didn't recognize. We were in a wide field. Must have been summer. She had curly brown hair, big sunglasses, and a laugh that came from deep in her belly. She looked happy. She looked in love. But not with me, with whoever was filming. That's it, sweetheart. A man's voice chuckled up from behind the camera. Get a close-up of those chubby cheeks. The woman cradled the baby, me, up toward the lens and winked. That's our boy, she said, and then turned towards something off camera. Her smile faltered slightly. The camera panned over. In the distance, near the tree line, stood a figure. Far away, unmoving, dressed in dark clothes, just standing there, watching. Do you see that? The woman asked. The man zoomed in slightly. The figure didn't move. It's probably just someone out for a walk, he said, though his voice was quieter now. She turned to him. That's the same man from yesterday, Frank. The camera jolted slightly, a jerk of motion, and then static, a hard cut. I rewound and played it again, and again, unsure what to make of it all. A creeping chill crawling up the back of my neck. The second tape was First Steps. Same woman, same man, same baby Nate. But this time, something was off. The house didn't match any memories. The wallpaper wasn't the one I grew up with. The couch was a different color than in any family photo. When I took those first steps, wobbling and laughing, I fell into the arms of that strange woman. She kissed me on the cheek. You did it, my big boy. In the background, through the window, at the edge of the yard, just beyond the fence, that same figure. Still, staring. I paused the tape, rewound it, went frame by frame. And there it was. Black clothes, long dark hair, pale skin. A barely visible face, but one I recognized. The man filming stepped into frame briefly. Broad shoulders, strong jaw, glasses. Not my dad, or at least not the man I'd grown up calling father. He gave the woman a kiss on the cheek, and together, with their child, me, they made a perfect family. Then came the third tape. Christmas, 1995. This one started out warm, familiar. The living room glowed with garland and wrapping paper. A crooked artificial tree stood in the corner. Holiday music crackled from the radio. The woman, my real mother, I realized wore a red turtleneck, no makeup, just joy in her eyes. She handed a present to the baby version of me, a toddler in green footy pajamas. Frank, that was his name, the man from earlier tapes, smiled from the carpet. He adjusted the camera on the tripod and gave a thumbs up. "All right, Nate," he said, "let's see what Santa brought you." He stood and knelt beside me, helping tear the paper. The camera, now unattended, faced slightly askew, catching the hallway just past the living room. Then, movement. A tall figure stepped into view. His hair was jet black, his clothes are dark, his posture was stiff and wrong. He stood half lit by Christmas lights, staring straight ahead. It was the man I knew as Dad, the man who raised me, but here in this footage, he was something else. My mother's gasp came first. "Frank," she whispered. "Frank, he's here." Then scuffling and the sound of paper wrinkling. Frank moved quickly, rising to stand between the stranger and his family. "You need to leave," Frank shouted. "This is our house. What do you want?" My baby self started crying, and the man in dark clothes stepped forward, a glint of metal by his side, a crowbar. Then chaos followed, a scream, a crash. The camera jolted off the table, landing half beneath the couch, angled low toward the floor. It didn't stop. It kept recording. Screams, sobbing, the clatter of glass, a child's wail, and with a heavy thud, a body fell into view. Within the sliver of view beneath the couch, Frank dropped into frame. He was bleeding, coughing, one arm twisted beneath him. A heavy boot stepped over him. The man. Frank looked panicked, and with a sickening squelch of meat and bone, the man beat Frank to death, striking his face with the crowbar. Once, twice, again. The screen flickered and went static, but it wasn't over. After a few seconds, the tape resumed. A different house, a different Christmas, new wallpaper, new tree, quieter. I was older now, around 3 years old, smiling, unbothered, opening a present. A toy dinosaur, battery operated. When I pressed its back, it roared. I grinned. From behind the camera, "Do you like it?" my father asked. I nodded, smiling and playing with my new friend. But in the background, just barely, almost missed, came the muffled sound of a woman crying, begging. "Please, please don't hurt my baby." Then footsteps, a door open. The same voice from the camera yelled something down the hall, or down the stairs. I didn't flinch, just pressed the dinosaur's button again. It roared and I laughed. The video ended. I sat there long after the screen went black. The camcorder was still humming. But I couldn't move. My heart felt hollow, my body cold. I kept thinking about Frank, about that woman, about the man who took me and made me call him Dad. I kept thinking about the toy dinosaur too. It was still in a box somewhere in my closet, my favorite toy growing up. And I thought about something else, something I hadn't realized until now. In all those tapes, there were no other kids, not even my siblings, just me. I'm going to call my sister. I need to talk to her about what I watched. I want answers. I want this feeling inside to go away. I want to know what's on the other tapes. Jeez, I want to know what's on the other tapes too. Like, what the heck? That was a freaky story. Can you imagine going through your whole life and this guy probably repressed these memories? I mean, or maybe he just didn't remember because he was a very small child, but gosh, going through your whole life and your parents are it's really just a guy who kidnapped you and killed your parents. This next one's from r/scary stories from user _the_mo_crow_. My father was a detective investigating missing children in Omaha. After he died, I found his body cam footage. The moment before my father died, he grabbed my arm so hard his nails dug into my skin and whispered something that still haunts me. At the time, I thought maybe the cancer had finally taken his mind. Now, I know it hadn't. I watched as the light faded from my father's eyes. The hospital machines made one last ticking noise before settling into complete silence. His chest rose and lowered one last time. His dark, sunken eyes settled onto mine before he passed. Even in death, he still looked afraid. There in the dark, I stayed seated, with no one to comfort me, hoping my mother would answer my call. My father, Jim Simmons, had no other family, no one to depend on. The few times I'd met him growing up weren't pleasant. He always seemed distracted, like he was never really there in the room with you. His eyes had this way of drifting toward the floor mid-conversation, like he was listening to something coming up through it. I supposed I shouldn't have been surprised. My mother had said he had a mental breakdown, that he was no longer safe to be around. Back then, it had taken him weeks to realize we were even gone. There were days he would lock himself in his own office and no one would see him till the next morning. I may not have known him well, and I was honestly kind of afraid of him, but I still cared for him. To see someone go like that, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. His last dying moments were soaked in a fear I didn't yet understand. His words repeated in the back of my mind over and over again. None of it made sense. Not then, at least. Looking back at it now, I wish he had never said them. To die in silence would have been better. Before death had taken him from this world and into the next, he looked at me with fear and anger. His lips trembled as the words parted from his mouth. I can hear them. They're still down there. All those lights. The emptiness. I tried. A tear gently rolled down his face. The heart monitor beeped louder. I really tried. I'm sorry. I'm afraid I'll... His last breath left his mouth with his eyes settled on mine. He was deranged, Alex, my mother scoffed on the other line. Look, whatever he did, or whatever he said, just forget about it. It doesn't matter anymore, and it doesn't concern you. What about his apartment? I said. I stepped outside the hospital and looked up at the stars. It was 1 a.m, and I could tell my mother wasn't sleeping. She had ignored my calls earlier. What about it? She hissed. Well, maybe there's something there that would explain whatever he was talking about. He gave me his keys. He gave you his keys? She sounded annoyed. What else was he supposed to do? Let the apartment complex take his stuff? Guess that makes up for all the years of not being your father. I rolled my eyes. Like you didn't run away from him after all these years. You never gave him the chance to redeem himself before his death. Still, she had a point, but none of that mattered. Not now. She continued. I don't like how he just popped back into your existence without talking to me first. You deserved a better father, Alex. Like you would have listened to him? I gave him plenty of chances. He destroyed our family with his stupid obsessions. It drove him mad. I could hear her breathing heavily now. She was pissed, and maybe rightfully so. What obsessions? What drove him mad, Mom? Every time I asked you, you just turned the other cheek and didn't respond. What was it that you were so afraid of about him? I waited and watched as an ambulance turned on its lights and sped off. Mom? I wasn't afraid of him, Alex. That's bullshit, Mom. How many times had you moved us across the country to get away from him? Do you really think that would work anyways? He was a damn detective. What do you want, Alex? It's getting late. I can't even begin to think about sleeping tonight. Not with that look he had on his face. Not after what he said. So, I confessed. You keep your secrets then. I'm gonna check it out, see what's there. This late? No. You stay put and get some sleep first. We'll talk more tomorrow. I want to be there when you go. Okay, I said, biting my bottom lip, knowing damn well if she did really want to go, she'll take her sweet time in doing so. Alex, promise me you're not going over there tonight. You need the rest. Okay, I promise, Mom. I lied. Without another word, I ended the call. I opened my right hand and looked down at the reflective metal in my palm. He had given me the key to his apartment. There was no way in hell I could sleep tonight. The apartment door creaked open so loud, I was afraid I had woken up all his neighbors on the ground floor. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. I watched as goosebumps crawled up my arms and across my skin. I wasn't alone. Something was there. Something was waiting for me all this time. The feeling of guilt settled in the pit of my stomach for being here so soon and lying to my mother. Like a spoiled child waiting to open their Christmas gifts before Christmas. Everything in here was mine now. No one else wanted it, or had any right to claim for it. I doubted my mother would have wanted any part of this. The truth was, though, I didn't care about his belongings. Sure, maybe someday I could use it or sell it, but I wasn't here for that. I wanted to understand what my father was so afraid of, what he must have felt guilty for, a burden he carried until his very last moment. It had only been 2 hours since he passed, and seeing his single recliner in the living room, no other chair or couch waiting for any company, I regretted not trying harder to get to know him after all these years away from my mother's grip. In the living room, stacks of books and papers were spread across the room. The air was stale. When I turned on the living room lights, 3 out of the 4 bulbs of the main light were out. It was too dim to get a good look at anything, so I pulled out my cell phone and turned its flashlight on and began looking around for clues. Anything that would point me in the right direction. The first thing I stumbled on was the living room wall behind the recliner. I moved closer to see, ignoring the sounds of the upstairs neighbor stumbling around above me. In large and small letters alike, my father had written words and sentences all across this wall with black ink. All these lights, all these rooms, they followed it. We followed them. Don't go into the tunnels. Don't go. Do not go. Do go now. I stumbled backwards. There were drawings of what looked like pipes and boxes. So many of them, I followed this trail which led me straight up to the ceiling, and I gasped. The entire ceiling was coated in black scribbles. More of the same words. There in the middle of the room, etched into the ceiling by what I can only imagine was made by a knife. Do you hear them? I shook my head and felt my stomach turn. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. Not so soon. My father's words were still ringing in my head. I'm sorry. I was afraid. I was in a room where a madman had lived. I felt sick. I headed straight for the door to get some fresh air, but a blue flickering light from another room caught my attention. I crept towards the nearly closed door and opened it. Inside was a computer and monitor, humming away through the night. The screen flickered on and off, a blue screensaver showing what looked like a blueprint. I walked into the room and turned the light switch on. Nothing happened. Did he really live like this? For how long? I raised my phone light and revealed the small desk room. I pulled out his desk chair on wheels and sat down. The screensaver was a blueprint of the tunnel systems below the city of Omaha. I then looked over down to my right. There was a newspaper on the desk, covered in dust. I lifted it up, dust scattered to the air as I brought it closer to view the date and title. April 20th, 2010. 9 children missing. On the front page for the City of Omaha News were small pictures of each child that had gone missing. All their faces smiling from what must have been a school yearbook. All of them were 8th graders. As I looked at each one, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A floorboard creaked behind me. I quickly turned around, expecting somehow my dead father to be standing right behind me, his terrified sunken eyes looking down at me. No one was there. A white stripe on a shelf behind me caught my attention. I pulled it away from the shelf and looked it over. It was a DVD case with a single disc in it, the label written with a black Sharpie. Body cam footage, April 2010. Without hesitation, I opened the case and inserted the disc into his PC. I was met with a lock screen. Irritated, I looked around at his stacks of papers and sticky notes. No indication of what his password would be. I sat there thinking, wondering how long I would be here and how much more I could handle of this presence I felt hovering behind me. My first attempt was simple. Admin and admin in all caps. Neither of them worked. I buried my face into my sweaty palms and sighed. I don't know him well enough, and I'm sure his shit wasn't good with computers. So I tried my mother's name, doubting every second of it as I hit the enter button. Nope. Finally, I landed on mine, and to my surprise, I was in. Great, another thing to add to the guilt. My heart raced as I hovered over the disk icon and sat there in the still darkness. The screen brightness reddened my eyes. There were 4 video files waiting on the screen. I played the first one and turned the volume up. Body cam footage 1. The video opened with a burst of static before the image slowly came into focus. There he was, a younger version of my father staring back at me as he adjusted the body cam's lens. He looked healthy and full of life, a man I barely recognized. The camera jostled as he stepped out of the car. It was 5:17 p.m. The sun was bright and made it hard to see as he moved forward outside towards what looked like a giant parking garage ahead. My eyes shifted back and forth as I waited to see what happened next. As he stepped inside the parking garage, he was met by a police officer. "Hey, Jim," the police officer said. He was overweight and clearly out of breath as he spoke. "What you got for me today, Hopper?" My father asked as they walked towards what looked like 2 kids further inside, waiting for them. Hopper shook his head and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Several kids, 9 of them to be exact, 8th graders. They've been missing since this morning. None of them showed up for school. Parents are worried sick. There's a pair up ahead that we've been questioning. I think you'll want to talk to them." "Wonderful," Simmons said. "Another waste of my damn time. So they skipped school and were afraid to suffer the consequences at home." "Maybe," Hopper hesitated then and scratched the back of his neck. "To be honest with you, though, I don't think so. Not these ones." They then caught up with the 2 kids who waited for them. Both of them looked nervous and uncomfortable as they waited inside the parking garage. "I'm Detective Simmons," my father said to them. He then turned his focus to the one on his left. "Let's start with you, son. What's your name?" "Adam," he said, his voice shaking. "Nice to meet you, Adam. You want to tell me what's going on?" Adam tried to speak, but struggled with his nerves. The other kid spoke instead. "They went down there." "What's your name?" my father spoke. His voice was calm and mostly gentle. "Kevin." "Down where, Kevin?" Kevin turned and pointed towards a maintenance door. "Through there." "Was the door locked when they tried to go in, Kevin?" Kevin shook his head no. "Did you watch them go?" He nodded yes. "They tried to make us go, but I didn't listen." "And why did they want to go down there?" my father asked. "The rooms." "The sewer?" Hopper said. Kevin and Adam shook their heads no. Kevin spoke again. "They wanted to see the rooms. Kids at school talk about it all the time." "Other kids have been going into the sewers?" Hopper asked. "I don't know. They talk like they have, but I'm not so sure." Adam then finally said something. Billy told them about it. "You're not talking about the homeless guy that usually hangs around in this garage, are you?" Hopper said. Both teens nodded. Hopper turned to Simmons. "They're talking about Billy Costigan. I'm sure you've met him before," he grinned. Simmons rolled his eyes. That addict always finding something new to cause trouble with. Doesn't surprise me one bit he started living down in the sewers. That's luxury for him, Hopper laughed. Simmons turned back to the boys who stood there nervously. Neither of them wanted to make eye contact. "You saw the kids follow him through that door?" Both of them nodded. Adam answered, his voice shaking. "We watched them follow him down. He said he found something." "Just like that? Followed the junkie down into the sewers?" Hopper said. "I guess so," Kevin responded. The footage ended. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes, almost missing the start of the next scene. I looked down to my right and saw I was still on the first tape. Both my father and Hopper were now descending a rounded metal staircase, their feet clattering against the metal steps. Every now and then they would pass a light bulb on the concrete wall. The stairs seemed to go on and on. I could hear them talking, but I couldn't make out any of the words they were saying amongst the rattling noise of their footsteps. When they finally reached the bottom, there were voices on the other side of a large metal door. Hopper opened the door, and they walked into what looked like a large tunnel. There, standing on a platform, were several more men in different uniforms and what looked like a small fire crew. All of them were wearing hard hats. One of the men in a blue hard hat spoke to Hopper first. "I can hear them, but it doesn't make sense." The men surrounded a large wooden table with a blueprint laid across it. My father cleared his throat. "Where do you think the children are currently?" One of the firemen moved in closer and pointed to the map for my father. "This area right here. Now, if you look over here, just about a block away, that's where we are. We can hear the children chatting, whispering to one another. I think they're still trying to hide from us." "Take me there?" Jim asked. The fireman nodded and moved away from the table and blueprint. The whole group followed him down the tunnel. They rounded a corner and eventually they came to a new opening, built right into the side of another large tunnel. In it were several vertical pipes on the left side, and on the right was a single small pipe sticking out of the wall. 3 other men were already inside, talking to each other. The room was no bigger than a bedroom. The fireman paused and then pointed toward the horizontal pipe sticking out of the right side of the wall. "If you listen, you can hear them through that pipe." My father got down on his knees and leaned in, the camera shifting in its place. I could no longer see the pipe itself, but I was tilted at an angle just enough I could see the other men standing in the room with him, watching. They looked helpless and confused. The first thing I could hear from the footage was giggling, a child's giggle, then a kid's voice telling someone to give it back. My father moved closer to the 8-inch diameter pipe. "Hello, can anyone hear me?" The children continued to giggle and laugh. Sometimes what sounded like words were said, but nothing sounded clear enough to understand. Simmons took his metal flashlight out and banged it hard against the pipe. The sound carried through a ways before going silent. "Hello, anyone there?" Simmons yelled. One of the men in blue hats shook his head. His face was bright red as he confronted the rest of the men in the room. "Look, I get that we can all hear them in that pipe, but I'm telling you, none of this makes sense." My father got off his knees. "They're in there somewhere. We need to find an entrance to that room. Where is it?" The man scoffed. "You're not listening to me, goddammit. None of you are." "Take it easy, Carter," Hopper said, his arms crossed against his chest. The man stood there and lowered his head. He then looked straight at the pipe, his eyes heavily focused. That pipe was abandoned years ago. It leads to nothing, just concrete upon more and more concrete. It was originally to help with overflow, but those plans got scrapped for something else. I was here when we put it in. I am telling you, it's not connected to anything. Not other pipes, not other rooms. Not even a toddler could crawl inside it. There's nothing in there." The room fell silent. All their eyes focused on the pipe sticking out of the wall. Only the voices of the children echoed through the silent room. End of body cam footage 1. I think that was a good one to end it on today. Insanely creepy story, and that was only part 1. I'm actually waiting for part 2 to come out of that one. That's all the stories I have for you today. If you liked today's video, drop a like and subscribe. If you didn't, I don't know what to tell you. Thanks for watching. Peace.